Today on Brew Report, we're tackling the most divisive question ever asked. Bottle or can? Hello there and welcome back to Brew Report, where this week we're putting two forms of the same beer head to head. This is Sierra Nevada's Pale Ale, a classic craft beer, if there can be such a thing. One of the beers that really kick-started the craft beer revolution. And I've got it here stored, packaged two ways. One in a glass bottle and the other in a draft style can. Today we're going to take a look at what this beer looks like, how it smells, how it tastes, how it feels, and compare to see which of these two packaging styles is better, and ultimately answer the question, is this a good beer for you? Let's get cracking. Let's start with the immediately obvious aesthetic differences between these two beers. Clearly, they look very different. One is in a bottle, one is in a can. The label is very much the same, similar color scheme, very similar logos and so on. But what we can tell from this is that these beers are very slightly different. If you look at the alcohol by volume, the alcohol content on the bottle, you'll see that this beer is 5.6% by volume. If we look at the can, the draft style can, whatever draft style means, this is only 5.0%. They're the same volume, same number of milliliters. It just means that you're getting slightly more alcohol, slightly more ethanol in the bottle than you are in the can. Not clear yet what impact that's going to have on the flavour and on the texture and so on, but generally for a higher volume beer you would expect it to have more intense flavours, more intense aromas and a slightly richer mouthfeel. So we'll see when we compare these two beers side by side whether that plays out when it's in the glass. The other difference we find with the bottle is that there's a little line on the back here clarifying this is a craft beer, it is a living product. That tells us that this is a bottle conditioned beer. There is some yeast undergoing secondary fermentation within this bottle, which means it's a real ale by the standard camera definitions. We don't get that single line on the can version, and the fact that we don't have that line, the fact that it says draft style on the can, suggests to me that we don't have any secondary fermentation going on here. It may have been tank fermented, it may have had some other secondary fermentation elsewhere, but it's not a living fermenting product at this point when it's in the can in front of us. Taking a look at these two beers' appearances when they're in the glass, I'm very glad I've kept them next to the packaging, because honestly, if you put these two beers on the table in front of me, I'm not sure I'd be able to tell which is which. Looking at the bottle, we can see it's this beautiful, fairly clear amber with a white, fine textured head. And when we look at the can version, it's largely the same. Next, we take a sniff of these beers, see what the aroma is like. So there's this beautiful balance of grapefruit rind, grapefruit juice, and the sort of bready, toasty malt aroma. It's not overly citrusy, it's not overly malty, it's just a very nice balance between the two. There's a touch of stone fruit in there, a bit of apricot, maybe a little bit of sort of underripe apricot nectarine, that sort of thing, and a touch of pine, not hugely so, but enough there just to detect it. The main flavours still those grapefruit and malt flavours. Now the can is less intense. I'm not getting as much of that grapefruit specifically. I'm still getting the malt, still getting that bready, slightly toasty malt, although that itself is a little bit more closed off, a little bit less full than what I'm getting from the bottle. Still getting a touch of that pine resin, a touch of that stone fruit, that apricot, but it's a less intense aroma than we're getting from the bottle. The palate for the bottled beer is very smooth. And the defining characteristic of this beer, certainly when it's in your mouth, is that it's a very smooth beer. There's a medium amount of bitterness, but not so much that it's overpowering. There's a decent amount of sort of grapefruity, citrus aroma. There's a decent amount of maltiness, but overwhelmingly the one word I'd use to describe this beer is smooth. It's got that malt, it's got that bready malt, it's got that slight toastiness to it, it's got that pine resin, it's got all of these different flavours playing together, but they balance very nicely in a way that makes it extremely drinkable. The can, let's see how this compares. Pale ale in the can, still very smooth. and still very drinkable. Where it differs is that while it has a lot of those same flavours, a lot of those same characteristics, it's everything that we see in the bottle, but less so. It's got that grapefruit, but less of it. It's got that malt, but dialed down a touch. It's just a less intense version generally. And as a result, I'm left a little bit wanting. I don't know whether it's that additional 0.6% alcohol, whether it's the fact that the beer in the bottle is bottle conditioned, it's still fermenting, but something in there, something in the bottled version is just that little bit nicer, a little bit more decadent, a bit more luxurious. It's got a thicker mouthfeel, it's a little bit smoother, a little bit more flavoursome. But there's one more point that we need to think about when we're comparing these two serving styles, and that's the practicalities of it all. You see, if I've got a few friends around, and yes, I do have just a few friends, and we drink, say, 12 of these beers between us across the course of an evening, and I've got 12 empties to take down to the recycling the next morning, I would far rather be taking the cans than the bottles. That's going to weigh far less, it's going to be far less inconvenient, far less noisy to take down to the recycling at the end of the day. Equally, when I'm picking them up from the shop in the first place, these are bulkier, the bottles are heavier, they make more noise, and if I drop the can, the worst thing I've got to look forward to is a slightly frothy beer. If I drop a bottle, that's it gone, and there's broken glass everywhere. So which of these beers is right for you will depend on the context. It depends on what you're doing with it. If you are just enjoying one or two beers to celebrate the end of a hard working week, then absolutely, the bottle is the way to go. It tastes nicer, it's more decadent, it's a little bit stronger, but if you're only having one or two, not a problem. If you are going out to a barbecue or a picnic, or you're enjoying these beers on the beach, then you should probably go for the can. It's not so much lighter, it's not so much worse that it's really going to make a huge difference to the enjoyment. Certainly, it's very unusual you'll be drinking these two beers side by side. And the advantages that you have in terms of the portability, about the fact that you don't have to worry about breaking it, means that in that sense, it's probably a better option. Either way, this has been a fascinating process. I hope you've enjoyed it almost as much as I did, probably less so because I was drinking beer the whole time, but you can drink along next time perhaps. Hopefully you found this useful. If you enjoyed the video, do like it, subscribe to the channel, check out the rest of my videos, and you can also go to brewreport.co.uk for fresh beer content every Sunday. And until next time, happy drinking. Now, according to the can and the bottle, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is brewed in Chico. Shall we feed you some hops and see what happens? Yeah?